thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. And then, if you don't mind, I will share the screen. So, because I prepare a PowerPoint that will be, I think, will be useful for you to follow the presentation. Can you see well the screen? Okay, great. Again, thanks a lot for being. I was going to say to being here, being there. I don't know, with being with you, because we are online, all of us in many places. And it's a great pleasure, and I think I have to thank, because this is also an experience for me. It's a learning experience also for me. Sharing, when you have to explain something, reflecting on something helps always to really learn more about what you are going to say. And as Chanel mentioned, I want to have a particular mention to Ukrainian people, and I would like to dedicate my session as a way of prayer. The work is prayer, so offering this brief presentation for them, to pray for the future. And then, when I was asked about what could we talk, etc., I thought, Chanel told me, this idea of speaking to people who works in communications will be very interesting to reflect on some of the experiences or lessons that we can learn from Pope Francis, which is a particular, really very original, let's say, original Pope, who really has many teachings, many interesting teachings for us. And so I decided to following his model, to offer some reflections that go beyond the person of the Pope, but I think can be useful for all of you. And just so you have an idea, this is the path that I plan to follow in these presentations.
Excuse me, Professor Danny, just one thing. Maybe we can go a little bit slower to help our translators. Okay.
Of course, I'm sorry. That's the Latinos speak very fast, so I'm sorry for that. So this is the contents that you see on the screen. Will be like the path that I will follow to explain and trying to explain through my presentation. The second point, the continuity, really, I will go over, so I am not going to enter because we don't have time to explain so many things. But after an introduction, I will explain a little bit about the continuity of the popes. I mean, it's not Pope Francis is unique, certainly, but is in continuity with the precedent pontificate. So in that sense, there are many aspects that were present in John Paul II, Benedict XVI, etc. But from this example, I will present like 5 models, 5 paradigms, 5 dimensions, 5 frames, if you want, that can be very much, I think, applicable to your work, your daily work as communicator. And at the end, we can talk about suggestions and have a discussion. So let's start with the small introduction. Chanel already mentioned, I work here in a school of church communications. We focus on teaching or preparing people that will be in the future responsible for communications of church institutions, so in all the fields, spokespersons, directors of communication, advisors, directors of Catholic media, responsible for communications in non-profit organizations, etc. So my talk will be essentially from this perspective, as a communications perspective. There are many elements, and probably you know better than me about that, pastoral elements related to the things that I will say that have other dimensions that you can deepen on them, and I'm not going to talk. And my focus is always in communications. And even though it's true that I am consultor for the Dicastery of the Vatican, I'm speaking on my name, not on the name of the Vatican in this talk. Just don't think that this is what the Pope told me. This is my personal opinion, I think, from the experience, from the things that I'm reflecting, but certainly is a personal view that tries to offer an interpretation of the actions and the deeds, and the words that Pope Francis offers, does, says, etc. And then I think that can explain from a communications perspective his actions, his pontificate, let's say. And certainly they are not, let's say, this Pope is not a theoretical Pope, or it's not a theoretical communicator. He acts, he does, he says, and from his actions and from his words, we can deduce lots of communication principles. But it's not that he makes a theory and then applies the theory. No? He's more like a pastor, no? A pastor who is really in contact, a shepherd, no? In contact with the sheep and constantly. And so he has not systematized these theoretical principles that I'm going to offer to you. It's more a reflection, watching the things that he does. But I think that can be really applied to many of the realities of your work. So as I said, I'm not going to deepen on this. I just want to say that there is a continuity between John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis. Certainly, a continuity with different tones, different accents. This is certainly true. And we can discuss, if you want, at the end, if we have a Q&A about particular aspects that you may be interested in this. At the time, I don't want to waste time now making a too long introduction. The 5 points, the 5 paradigms that I mentioned, that I want to explain you now, are these, no? And these paradigms is something that I've been hearing other people talking about these things. I have been reflecting about that a little bit. My first source of inspiration is really a document that has been kind of forgotten, which is Evangelii Gaudium. Evangelii Gaudium is the first written document by Pope Francis, no? Like his programmatic exhortation, apostolic exhortation, at the beginning of his pontificate, in which he delineates very well many of the things that he has been doing afterwards. And it's true that this document, again, is a pastoral document. No? Evangelization is the focus of the exhortation, but there are many implications, I think, for communications. And this is one of the sources that I'm going to follow in this presentation, because I think that document explains a lot of the things that this Pope is doing today, no? Has been doing the last almost 9 years. No? And then let's start with, these are the paradigm of conversion, the paradigm of kindness, the paradigm of unity, the paradigm of mercy, and the paradigm of hope. Let's start with the first one, the paradigm of conversion. It's not me, because I'm not a priest. You're a priest, not me, who has to do now a homily, no? Telling you the importance of prayer, etc. But certainly that's the point of departure of a communications, of a communicator, no? Somebody who's working in communications. And the Pope, I think, clarified that very well in his 5th chapter of Evangelii Gaudium, dedicated to the evangelizers with the Spirit. No, and he said that if we are people who don't pray, who doesn't have, in the sense, a Christian life, call and respond to this call to holiness, each one with his own vocation or her own vocation, in its own situation, with their own charism, etc., etc. But all of us are called to sanctity, no, to holiness. So if we don't pray in our life, we don't live a fully Christian life, all our communications, let's say, is unfruitful. It's fruitfulness. It doesn't make any sense. No? So in that sense, I would like to start departing from here. The point of departure for a Christian communicator is the need of really living his faith at full, no? At the most, with the efforts, with mistakes, with limitations. That's another. But certainly trying to reach this. That's like the point of departure. But what's the situation today? The situation, and the Pope explains that also pretty well. We are in a time of crisis in many different areas. You can apply to the church, for example, all the crisis of the abuses, the sexual abuse scandals that have been hitting the church in many aspects, certainly in essential aspects, but also, of course, in communication. The image, the reputation of church institutions, of priesthood, etc., is at the lowest level that we can imagine. And this is a communication crisis with a basis, more deep basis, but certainly has a communication dimension. So we have in a crisis in the church, but we are in a crisis in society. We just finished. I was talking the other day with somebody. The last 20 years have been periods of constant crisis. 9/11, the world change, financial crisis, coronavirus crisis, and now the war in Ukraine. So we are in Syria, etc., and Ukraine. So certainly we are in a period of crisis, no? And before or in front of this situation, one of us, a communicator in this case, can become discouraged, no? To say, well, it's just terrible, no? There's no solution. But precisely what the Pope does in his Pontifical, his magisterium, his document in particular, is changing the thing. These problems, church and society, require a reform, a transformation. But of course, a juridical reform, a communications reform, an economic reform, etc. But most of all, a conversion, a change, an internal change in the life of the church and in the personal life of each one. So an internal, let's say, conversion. And I think this is like an interesting premise for a communicator. If I want to change the world, in the sense that if I want to have an impact, a positive impact with my communications, I have to also convert myself, change myself. I think what is Lent is the perfect moment to talk about that, but I'm going beyond Lent. And then, okay, but this is a premise, this is a general idea. What about the communication? How can we apply or concretize, make concrete this paradigm of reform, this of conversion in our communications, in our daily work, in the communications offices, or wherever field we are? And I think two manifestations or two ways, two examples, we can make live this conversion is the ones that I mentioned here. Humble language and serene and perseverant communication. What do I mean by this? Humble language means that certainly we are not, or we are also sinners. The premise, no? We have mistakes in the church. We have committed mistakes. The case of the sex abuse scandals is a very good example of how the church is responding. Also, not just with the rules, no, with the discipline, safeguarding regulations, rules, etc., but essentially with a conversion, also in the language, putting the victim in the first place, asking for forgiveness. I mean, recognizing what we are. And I think this is an attitude that has not to be applied just in the case of this sex abuse, but in all our communications. We are not perfect. We don't have the solution or the answer for everything. We have to count also in the collaboration with so many people. So part of our communications to manifest, to show this paradigm of conversion is being humble in our approach. No? And humble means thanking others for when they correct us, no? Means collaborating with others, means accepting suggestions, means dialogue with other people from other ideas, etc. We can develop this in many ways. And the second aspect will be having or showing, being in our communications very serene and perseverant. No? Serene in the sense that we cannot put more acid, I don't know if there's a expression, no? More bitter tone in the society, in a world that is already bitter itself. No? And it's wounded. It's a wounded society, a polarized society. And the role of a church communicator, an ecclesial communicator, a Christian communicator in general, is that of putting oil. No, if it works in English, but making the communications soften relationship between people, with a serene and quiet and amiable communication. And this is not something that I'm just saying to you in the sense that you are responsible for a communications office, or a newspaper, or a magazine, or whatever. But I think it's an attitude that we can transmit to others. We can share with others. We can help others to have this attitude. Because really, a Christian is this, no? Somebody who helps others in dialogue, and that depends on how we approach dialogue. Being perseverant means that we have to say the things that we have to say. I mean, it doesn't mean denying the reality, denying the truth. I mean, we need to denounce when there is mismanagement or there are mistakes, but with a very serene, quiet, calm way. No? There is no need to get angry in the communication. No? being patient. No? Okay, so this is the first paradigm that I would like to offer as an approach to communications following the example of Pope Francis. Let's go for the second one, which is the paradigm of kindness. I think you all remember, this Pope is very graphic, no? Even in his words and his homilies and the examples that he used. In several moments, he has mentioned that a Christian cannot have a funeral face. No? So we end with a Christian is somebody who has to be cheerful, has to be optimistic, has to be joyful. And this is something that is very clear in the tone of this pontificate, in everything. No? You can just take these examples, these two names of these two big documents of Pope Francis Evangelii, Gaudium, the joy of the gospel, Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love. No? So, and he has other examples. No? His face, no, trying to smile people. I mean, is clearly the Pope's. These papers is strongly marked by this tone, this characteristic of kindness, no, of positivity, which is what makes Christian faith, Christian life attractive. And this is something. So sometimes more than communicating ideas, we have to communicate, let's say, feelings. Not because we abdicate of ideas, but the ideas really pass through storytelling, through feelings, through the heart. More than reaching the mind, we need to reach the heart of people many times. And I think this Pope has done that very well. There is another example of this of Pope Francis. It's an old image already, maybe 2015 or 2016. It means Vietato lamentarsi means forgiven to complain. That would be the translation. And this is like a brochure that a doctor, psychologist, I think, psychiatrist, who was in St. Peter's Square, an audience of Wednesday audience, he gave to the Pope in the moments that Pope was passing through the people to greet some people. This doctor gave him this brochure, I mean, this cartel, this poster. And the Pope liked it so much that he put it in his office. And this is the picture of his office. It was there for a while. I don't think it's anymore. No? But the Pope wanted certainly that people saw it, and he wanted that this picture appeared on the Vatican News. He's taking the thing for the Vatican News. So that's a message, certainly. You know? He wanted to transmit a message. We cannot read now the details, but certainly there is not only this motto, forgiven to complain, but there are also some rules to do that. No? It's very funny. No? You can look for the picture on internet. No? But I think the message is clear. No? In what sense? That even, I mean, let's apply that to our communication, no? To our position, to our role or job. If we are unpleasant, no? In our communications, sgradevole in Italian, no? If we are intemperate in our communications, we are rejected. We are not listened. Even if we are right. That's very important. Even if we have the truth, no, we are on the truth. No? And if we are not amiable in our communications, we are not listened. And this is something that is not easy, because sometimes we are communicating in very polarized moments, situations. And certainly the social media don't help that. No? But this is something we have to have in mind. No? I think this idea of Saint Paul, veritatem facentes in caritate, I don't know how much verse are you in Latin, no? But essentially means making or presenting the truth in faith, with charity, no? Essentially, it would be a bad translation for sure. But so making the truth amiable. So kindness in a Christian, and particularly I think in a Christian communicator, is not an option. We cannot say, well, today with these people I'm kind, with my people I am amiable, with others I am tough. No. So, and I think this is a problem that we have also in the church today. This polarization that even some let's say, good Catholics, good in the sense that they are people who really try to do their best, people that pray, etc., enter into fights that don't help anyone. It's just, they just make the thing worse, let's say. And maybe I'm exaggerating, and we cannot always never generalize, but certainly kindness in communications, I think, is not an option. And kindness in all its manifestations. You can put there many words. You can say respect, you can say courtesy, you can say gentleness, you can say cheerfulness, you can say affability, you can say delicacy. Put so many words there. So there are many expressions that manifest this kindness in our communication. In speaking more specifically about what can we do in our work of communications, there are also two suggestions that I have here. And the first one is offering a communication of solutions and not a communication of problems. Let me explain what I mean. Again, I don't say that we have to deny the reality, ever. We cannot hide the reality. No? But we cannot fall into a pessimistic view that just points out the negative aspect. No? We don't have vocations, we don't have money, the war. I mean, of course, it's true. There are no vocations or less vocations. There is no money. There is a war, etc., etc. I mean, these things are true. But pointing or putting the emphasis in these aspects don't help anyone. What we have to do is putting the accent, without denying, without hiding the truth or the reality, in the positive aspects. And when I say positive aspects, I mean at least in the efforts for finding a solution to these problems. So, saying that everything goes wrong doesn't help anyone, but pointing out to the positive things gives hope, no? and is the way to start really finding a solution to these problems. And again, I'm not saying that we don't have to recognize mistakes, but let's put the case again of sex abuses. If we stop in the sorry, we have abused, we wouldn't put any solution to the problem. So the important thing, sorry, we have abused, but we are doing this, and we want to take care of the victims, and so it's something that we can apply again to many aspects. And together with this, well, if I have to say in a different way, I would say let's just speak less about problems and more about solutions. That would be my point of explaining this point. The second aspect or second manifestation, let's say, of our communicating kindness will be this idea of doing a joyful communication, a happy communication, even amusing sometimes. And I put this example here, which is an old example, but I have been using that for a few years now because I like it. I mean, as you know, Black Friday is a typical day of people shopping, compulsive shopping, you know? And well, there was this priest, I don't remember what country, but certainly a Spaniard or Latin America priest, who in his tweet, a Black Friday tweet to say, we offer you a discount of 100% if you go to confession right today, no? The last day of discount. No? So using a situation that everybody knows, which is Black Friday, that is a moment that people get online to buy cheaper things because there's this discount. He used that, maybe it was for his community or his parishioners, whatever. But I think it's an example. We don't need to do exactly this. This is just an example of a person who tries to be amusing, who has to be funny, if you want, in a communications, but communicating something very important, which is the forgiveness of sins, which is the most important thing that we can receive, the grace of God. So this idea that the Pope speaks about a creative apologetics, he says that in Evangelii Gaudium, he speaks about creative apologetics. I think that's an example of this apologetica creativa. No? And how do we really put into practice, how do we reach creativity in our communication? To apply these elements that I mentioned, being fun, being at the same time positive, well, there's certainly, I don't have the perfect solution to the thing, but here are 3 suggestions. And the first one is constant work. I mean, there is a general understanding in people, no, that the creatives, no, are the genius. No? These people who are Einstein is a genius, and he had. But usually, the real creators are those who do a constant work. When a person is constantly working, trying to find a solution to something, looking for different angles, meeting, asking for advice, trying trial and error, etc. In the end, you find the good creativity, creation, the good solution. Maybe it's a small thing. I mean, it doesn't mean that all the creations need to be discoveries of the relativity theory, but the relativistic theory. But probably the best way to really be creative in our communications is working in the daily work, doing our daily work well done. Because when we are constant, when we are ordered, put order in discipline, etc., is when the things come up with it. Probably you all have the experience, that we have been working some things for a long time, and someday that in bed, and you have the great idea, and you have to take note before you forget. No? Well, because of course that's a gift of God, no? Probably, but certainly is a gift that comes after putting our human effort behind. So I think that's the first time. And don't think that the creative solutions come just from people who has the more money or more intelligent. No. The normal people can really find very good solutions. The second aspect, of course, is not just working, but we have to work putting our minds in that, and we have to form ourselves. Have a big or profound cultural formation. So in that sense, and Shanil knows very well because he has studied here, one of the encouragements is reading. Literature, history, philosophy, art, depending on also on the interest. But we cannot just focus on reading the pastoral documents that we're using, whatever it is, in our field. I mean, we have to open our minds, because creativity comes from ideas, and ideas means reading the classics, for example. Each one comes from different cultures. I understand that, and not everybody has to read all the same books, but there are some classics in literature that help us a lot, to understand anthropology, and the basics of men and history. And finally, learning from others. I mean, there are many people outside in the church and outside the church that do wonderful things. Just learn from others. Copy in a good sense, respecting all copyrights, but learn, because there are experiences in other countries, in other institutions, in other activities that are very helpful for us. So doing this benchmarking, watching what others are doing. In the case of congregation, for example, or that if you are focusing in a particular field, the youth, for example, do what other youth institutions do. Because I'm sure that you can learn about applying that, or modifying or interpreting that through your own charism. But there are many things. We don't have to invent the wheel every time. There are many things that are really useful for them. Okay, but this is would be like the second, I would say, ways of concretizing the paradigm of kindness. Let's go for the third one, which is the paradigm of unity. Unity, the church is an institution, but it's a community, more like institution really, but it's a community with a high diversity of charisms and realities and people. This unity without uniformity, this expression that we have heard so many times. But it's true, unfortunately, it's true that in this crisis that I mentioned before, this time of crisis, there is a time of much division, which is this polarized context. In society, I mean, this is not just a problem of the Catholic Church. It's a general problem. We don't have to be concerned in the sense, in the church we are very bad in that situation. No. The society is a bad situation. The sickness is in society. Since the church is part of society, we are also being affected by this division, this polarization. But certainly, if this is a problem in society, it's sad that in the church sometimes we have also this fight, maybe this ideological or whatever you call it. I would say, is less acceptable division in the church than outside the church, if we can say so. And then the Pope, this is something that he has explained also very well in Evangelical. The conflict exists. The important thing is to face it and overcome it. This is our objective. And one of our goals as communicators is this, no? Showing unity, creating unity, helping to unity. No? And this is a good thought that we can do every time that before we send an email. I mean, maybe not every time, because if we do every time, we wouldn't send an email at the end. So, but sometimes it's good to say, no, in my communications, in this communication that I'm doing now, in this email, in this message, in this tweet, etc., I'm helping to unity, or I'm hurting unity. That's a good question to ask ourselves every time, sometimes, because it would change a lot, or can change a lot our perspective on how we do. In any case, we are actors or agents of unity among ourselves in this place, but also within the church. So what to do to practice, to put into practice from a communications perspective, this this defense of unity, no? Or this promotion of unity, let's say. Well, the first one, again, the supernatural outlook, having we who have a view of faith, no? Believe in God and trust in God, certainly this gives us much calm. No? We are not, I mean, we know that there are problems, we know that God is behind. So in this sense, that helps a lot. This premise, that doesn't mean that we don't do anything. That would be big quietism, no? But at least we understand that God is always behind. So that helps us also to be very patient. Sometimes in our communications, we expect results immediately. This is impossible to reach many times in communication. So we have to be patient and knowing that things are resolved many times require much time to be resolved and don't depend on us alone. So there are other circumstances, other people who also gives their own contribution to find a solution for a problem. And even in the life of the church, things take time. And even the problems now, we have to try to fix them, but we have to be patient. It will take time to, and we'll talk about that later. And probably the last element, which probably is the most interesting here for us, is focus our communication always in the field in which we are and with our own charism in the essential issues. The essential issues, which are the ones that unite. Let's not enter into fights of secondary, let's say, issues or elements that no one is really interested in. As I mentioned before, no, our society is a wounded society. This is a Pope's expression also. And you remember very well this expression that he uses the church as a field hospital. There are many people who is wounded in a war. There is wounded people, and so people bleeding, no? Because there are anthropological wounds, families destroyed, people without meaning of life. I mean, the suicides of youth have grown a lot in the last decades, no? In the last decades, especially, no? Poverty, no? Migration, rejection of immigrants sometimes, no? The throwaway culture that the Pope speaks of. No? So there are many anthropological wounds. People is hard. You know? So trying to focus our discussions in, let's say, liturgical, dogmatical, moral. I'm not saying that they are not important, but certainly they are not a priority. The typical example they put, no? The Mass should be in Latin or in vernacular Latin. It's wonderful. I love Latin. I love it, and I go to Mass in Latin many times. But that's not the problem that people have. Let's face it. The people have much more important ones. Maybe for some circles, this is an important discussion. But let's not put into the discussion, in our communications to people, things that they are not healing them. They're not helping. So this is the focus, or the point of focusing our communications on essential issues. Look for something that helps, and trying to do that with other people. Pope Francis has encouraged us a lot to do this and not being afraid of being hard, putting ourselves to risk, no, in doing this thing. And he has an image, a picture that you probably remember, this is a picture of his trip to Colombia. I don't know if there is any Colombian of the group, the audience here. But this is an image of his trip to Colombia. He was on the Pope Mobile, going, I don't know, from one place to another. There was a person who crossed the street, and the Pope Mobile had to stop. They pressed the brake very strongly, and the Pope hurt his face with the window of the car. No? And this is the image next day. No? He had to put some cure, etc. And he's the image of the Mass. And the Pope didn't have any fear of appearing like this, no? With his stitch of his face, with the I mean, it was a big, not a small hit. No? Well, and that reminded me very much. He didn't say in that occasion, but I put the things together. He remind me very well this expression that he used. I prefer a church injured, wounded, no? and a stain, that a church sickened by confinement, that is closing itself and doesn't go to the peripheries and doesn't go to the. And that one for me was very. In Italian is very strong, no? Chiesa bruciata, ferita e sporca. I prefer this, that the church is sick, malata, no? Per essere chiusa in se stessa. No? So this is a church that closing itself. No? That will be, so we have to go out. No? And this is a message for communicators. No? We cannot close ourselves in our discussions, internally, inter-ecclesial discussions. We have to go outside, which that doesn't mean forgetting the people in our communities, but we cannot stop our communication there. And there are 3 examples. There are many others, but just put 3 examples here. Some media outlets, Catholic media outlets, that try to do this. I think they do a pretty good job in trying to do this communication positive, kind, no? not being confrontational. One is New Rome Report, this news agency that covers the Vatican in Spanish and English. It's not a Catholic media, but covers Catholic religion, essentially. So his focus is that, and I think they do a pretty good job in that. Aletheia also tries to really enter into dialogue with many people in a positive way, no? Or Exaudi, which is a very small Catholic news agency born in Italy, also in several languages. I think it was born 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Okay, so this was the 3rd paradigm. Let's go for the 4th. I know that I speak a lot, Chanel. If you want to stop me, you stop. You tell me how much time we have.
No problem. Go ahead. Yeah.
15 minutes is fine.
Sure.
Okay. And then the 4th paradigm, the paradigm of mercy. I'm slower because you asked me to speak slow, so I need more time. The paradigm of mercy. No? The paradigm of mercy will be like a paradigm that really unites the paradigms that we have said before. No? You know very well the motto that this Pope chose for his pontificate. No? Miserando atque eligendo. No? It says choosing and making decisions through the lens of mercy. No? So it's very interesting. From the beginning of his pontificate, mercy has been very much present in his decisions, in his actions, in his travels. The first visit that he did to this island of Lesbos, no, the migrants, the people dead on the Mediterranean, the Jubilee of Mercy, no, the Year of Mercy, and constantly examples, no? Statements, public words, and gestures. No? Do you remember very well in the first international travel of Pope Francis, coming back from Rio de Janeiro, who I am to judge? No? This sentence that generated so much polemic, no? So much polemic, an interesting polemic for a communicator, because for us was a great opportunity to talk about the Pope, about the Church. I mean, it's risky, it's what I said before. His popes like risk, or is not afraid of risk. But this is a way of showing this mercy also in the way that we judge people, that we treat people, that we consider people. No? All the church is a field hospital, etc. So there are many examples. Just to finish this point, I would say, like, with this paradigm, the paradigm of mercy, Pope Francis is like trying to pointing out or showing that charity is charity, which is in the end mercy. Mercy is another expression of charity. We say charity is the starting point, the criterion of validity, we could say, no, of the private and social behavior of the Christian. But there is no, we cannot say that there is Christian behavior and Christian communication, therefore, if there is no mercy side behind, motivated by. So we can say that I am a Christian. We can say it, we can go. Again, I'm not saying that we commit mistakes, but in a theoretical sense, we cannot say there is a good, real Christian communication if there is no mercy in that communication. If our communication hurts, doesn't heal, is not a real Christian communication. It doesn't mean that we don't have to say the truth many times, and the truth is tough. But we can say the truth in many ways. In many ways, when a father tells his child something that is wrong, you don't need to, and maybe the child cries, no? But you can do that with the tenderness, no, of a father. No? Okay, and then let's talk of the last paradigm. Excuse me, no, last paradigm, no. Developing this paradigm of mercy, I think there is a point, a very interesting point, which is this concept of the culture of encounter that the Pope has developed in many ways, but I think are very well expressed in these 4 principles that he offers also. In Evangelii Gaudium, you have even here the points, no? Evangelii Gaudium 222, 225, etc. These are the points in which the Pope develops these points that I recommend you to read, that maybe reflect and meditate on them. But I think these points express very well this idea of the culture of encounter that I'm going now to explain, at least from my perspective. Things that we can learn from these 4 principles and that we can apply in our daily work of communication. And let's start with the first one. No? Time is greater than space. No? I put this picture because I like it. I just and I think it expresses very well this point, but it's not that they had a particular choice. But what does it mean when the Pope talks about these principles? Certainly he has it in mind a pastoral approach. No? He goes beyond communication. No? He's approaching the liturgical, the sacramental life of the church, the moral aspects, and many aspects. No? But we can apply that a lot to communication. No? And then when he mentions this principle of time is greater than space, what does he mean for us? What is the meaning or the learning aspect that we can get from this? Because I think, and he somehow the Pope also mentioned some of these things. No? It speaks about many things, but the first one is we don't have to look for immediate results in our actions, in our communication, in this sense. No? We have to plan. And plan means, for our communicators, a strategic mind. Means thinking ahead, means thinking goals, means putting resources into things. It's not just acting by intuition. This idea that I mentioned before, the daily work for us is very important in our communications offices. No? And accepting the limitations, that's part of this, this idea of time is greater than space. We can do what we can do. And it's better now have in these conditions that waiting the perfect moment that never happens. So anticipating the problems, this critical thing, not critical thinking, no, issues management thinking, no? To say what are the issues, the problems, the topics that can hurt, can be complicated, can be interesting for me in the next years. Not just thinking in today's communication. Of course, we have to think on that, but we need to plan in the future. No? That's a good example of how can we apply this principle of time is greater than space. And I would like developing an idea that Pope Francis explains or presents in his exhortation. He talks about the famous parable of the weeds. You can read here in Matthew 13. I mean, you all know the parable. The parable is that parable that the farmers plant seeds. During the night arrive the enemy, let's say the bad guys. No, they seed the darnel or whatever it is, and it grows during the night. And when they wake up, they find that together with the I don't know how you say trigo. The good plants are together with the bad plants. No? That's essentially the parable. No? Okay, let's apply that to the communications. Well, I think it's a very interesting parable to apply to our field of communications. What happened in this parable? Let's think a moment what happened. And what is the attitude that we need to have in this situation? No? Well, the first attitude, I would say, is not being surprised that evil exists, that bad things happen. So we cannot expect that in our communications, everything is going well, that there are no problems. If we expected that, we wouldn't really need a communicator many times. So we have to live and coexist with evil. And this is part of our life. So problems means that we are in good condition. We are doing our work because we are in the place where we are trying to fix problems. So we are in the right place and doing probably the thing that we have. Not everything is under control. So the surprise that the farmers in the parable have is a lack of realism. They wake up and say, oh, what happened here? There is evil. Of course there is evil, but that's part of life. Sin has been in history since the beginning of since Genesis, no? It's present in our history. So it will be also in our actions, in our decisions. Second aspect, no? What do the farmers say? Somebody, they say, they go to the owner of the field and they say, somebody seed the evil in your property. So what they do, they put excuses. They put the guilt on others. When the problem is that they were sleeping. That's the problem of the farmers of the parable. And sometimes that's our problem, that we are not enough careful to avoid that bad things happen in our institutions, in our person, in our communications. Again, evil exists, but many times. But the important thing is to carry with our own responsibilities. Don't put the blame in others. Don't excuse ourselves. Someone has done it. No. You, me, have not sometimes done what we have. And this is something that we can apply in general aspect. This secularization of society is a problem of evil. Yes, but it's a problem that Christians, we have not been able to really Christianize, I would say, liberty, freedom, etc. Transmitting really what are the Christian principles, because maybe we have not communicated well them, we have not lived them well, etc. So, not coexist with evil. Don't give excuses. Being patient. They go to the farmers go to the owner and say, "You want that we cut immediately the evil?" But that God says or the owner says, "No. Let's wait until the end. No? Let's wait." At the end, everything will be clarified. So, being patient with the situations, even if things seem wrong, don't worry. If we are faithful, as I said before, we have faith. In the end, the things get resolved if we do our part. So that's a few attitudes that we can learn and apply to our daily communication. Not to get discouraged, not to get. But here the question is, okay, what happened? What is the solution? And here's what comes to my mind. The solution is that the bad guys occupy our space. We were not in our place. They came and they seed their own seed, their own idea, their own proposals in society. So probably one of the solutions, let's say, or the attitudes or the proposals that we can do is occupying the space. When I say occupying the space, I'm not saying imposing on others. No. That means anticipating the issues sometimes. Let's think, for example, I think there is there we have examples, recent examples in the past, the abortion battle, the divorce battle first, the abortion battle afterwards, the gender battle now. I mean, we have some ideological, certainly very important questions that hit directly to family, to issues that are essential, that we have lost. Sometimes we are not, they arrive before us. The people proposing these ideas, They arrived before, and so now we are combating in the trench, sometimes in worse conditions than that. So I think that's an example of how can we, this idea that I mentioned before. Let's think ahead. What are the issues that are coming in the future that we can be interested in, and we can start proposing and lead the agenda? This theory of the agenda setting, this is something we can apply also in our fields, in our areas. And let's think, for example, the ecology. I mean, of course, ecology, there are many things in ecology, but the Pope has launched this concept of integral ecology. How much can we develop there to offer things that are positive for society in all fields, not just in the Amazonia, which certainly also in the forest of the Amazonia, but in the cities, in the urbanism, in the relationship between communities with immigrants, etc. Of course, collaborate with others, I think, is another example that we are a minority many times in many countries, in many situations. Christians have not anymore we have to collaborate with others, and because we cannot do everything alone, and because there are many people who really have good intentions, good ideas. So the important is to find them. And finally, creativity. With this ongoing formation, I think this talk that we are having today is an example of this desire of growing and improving. So I think that's it. Again, very quickly, because the next ones we can skip a little bit. I'm just going to mention some aspects of the other 3 points. The unity prevails over conflict. The Pope says it's inevitable. Conflict is inevitable. It's part of life. We have to resolve it. And the solution is certainly proposing a culture of dialogue and respect. Principles or criteria or elements that we have to consider is this idea of dialogue depends on if we understand who we are. Having a clear identity, that's the main element to really start a dialogue with anybody in any field. Having a clear identity helps us to understand that we have limitations. We have committed sins or committed mistakes. So recognizing our limits, this principle of accountability applied. So when we make a tweet and somebody gets offended because we were not, we were too tough maybe, or tweet or message, whatever, we need to ask forgiveness. I mean, that's part of the accountability. Asking for forgiveness when we have committed a mistake and put a solution to it. Respecting the identity of others. This idea of the Pope says a reconciled diversity. We have to respect others and trying to work with others. And I would say there is an expression which is being sowers of peace. This is probably one good definition of first communicator, Christian communicator, sower of peace and joy. And you have, I put this image because this is an oasis, oasis you can see, the desert. But we need to create these oases that in the middle of this polarized society, people fighting, create these spaces that grow, that need to grow, to really reach and unite oases among them, create these spaces where people can live in the sense of can dialogue, can stay, can feel, even with different ideas, can respect each other. But as somebody said in a very interesting question, an oasis, of course, is a very beautiful place in the middle of the desert. But our oasis, the oasis that I'm mentioning, are oasis that need to be watered down. So we need to pour out water. We want that our oasis keeps going on. So the oasis don't happen by itself. And we need to put this water of charity that I mentioned, this water of mercy in our communication that helps to keep the oasis alimenting, feeding trees around. Last point, reality is more important. No, last one, two more. This one, reality is more important than ideas. We follow a person, certainly. We are not, our vision is not a vision of a book, it's a vision of a person. And this is something that in communications can be very well manifested in the communications through testimonies. We know that very well. The storytelling is an example. of this putting reality before the ideas, no? And using the history of the church, the history of the saints, the history of the martyrs, giving voice to the people that have voice, etc., etc. These are examples of how to live, how to put this reality in the first place. No? It's a way of encountering people, no? Because this is the thing that attract the most to people. No? And I think we need to take advantage also of the communication of events. I'm sure that in your institution you have also some centenaries, maybe, or festivities, particular festivities of the foundation. World Youth Days are a wonderful example for this. World Family Days are an example of this. I mean, we have many events in the church, local and national, international level, that are occasions to really put the reality in front of the ideas, no? To show the life of the church, and their communications is an essential. How to present these events, no? How to prepare the messages that we want to communicate through these testimonies, this is an essential. And then let's go to the last one. The whole is greater than the part. Picking up this idea of Benedict XVI, no? We are certainly a creative minority, so we have to really look or consider that the world is much bigger than us. And in that sense, we need to have this spirit of collaboration, trying to really not being in confrontation with others, avoiding prejudices, this idea that Pope Francis mentioned before. No? So let's think, for example, what is my contribution, each one of us in our daily work. Again, so there are big questions, but sometimes reflecting on that, we can get small, concrete something. But what is my contribution to society or to the church with this action that I'm taking, I am doing? No? And because sometimes we get so much focus on our daily work that we don't think in the big, we lose the big picture. And sometimes it's good to have the distance to get this, and having this idea of finding dialogue with others. No, we don't have solutions for everybody. Says that. No? I just have three more slides and I'll finish. And this is the last paradigm. No? The last paradigm that I see more as a way of conclusion, as a look into the future. This idea of the of hope, the paradigm of hope. No? And the Pope speaks in the Evangelii Gaudium, 86, about this concept of the spiritual desertification. No? We can see, unfortunately, we can see in front of us a wall that is without direction. Everything is going bad, as I mentioned before, until anti-family laws, lack of vocations, crisis, the war, terrible. No? And in front of this, the danger is a pessimism. And pessimism is a cancer. It's a cancer of communications, because enters without realizing, enters into our communications. The tone of our communication expresses who we are. And if we are negative people, we communicate negativity. This is, I mean, we cannot, this is the idea of the funeral phase, no? The Pope said before. No? And then what can we do in front of this? No? Well, there are two things. The first one is something to avoid. No? Avoid this psychology of siege. Thinking that everybody or everything is against us, because it's not true. Being closed in our own castle, no? And closing, let's not talk to anybody, no? I respect all the ideas, no? But I think this Benedict option, no? Position sometimes is part of this attitude. The world is in a very bad situation. We need to just talk among ourselves, create our safe communities, and from there we can. I'm not saying that there are moments, particular moments in history that these things can happen, no? But I don't think this is a situation today. If we close ourselves, we die ourselves. We lose contact with them. So overcoming this psychology, people is not against us. No? There are bad things, but people is not against us. More times it's ignorance, it's problems, etc. But in positive, let's go to the positive, as I said before. What can we do? And here I take a concept from one of our professors I like a lot, so I use it sometimes, which is this concept of cultural reforestation. And he gives the example, he says, the society is like a mountain. There's a mountain that is full of trees, the pines, the abbots or whatever they call, that sustain the mountain. If you eradicate the trees, you cut all the trees, in the end the mountain falls down because it doesn't have consistency. These are the roots of the trees who keep the mountain ahead. No? Well, but this has happened in society. No? Many of the radical concepts that keep society, family, love, parenthood, marriage. I mean, you put the anthropological concepts. No? The concept of love is a good example. Have been eradicated in last let's say centuries, but certainly decades. No, with the because of secular. It's not the point now to establish that or to study that because it has been studied by people who knows much better than me. But there is a process of secularization related to many things that have eradicated these concepts, and the society is fraying. Is going down. I mean, this is evident, no? So our goal as a communicators, not just Christian, but certainly Christian communicators, is recuperating, doing this cultural reforestation, putting again the basic concepts that sustain society into place. No? So replanting, reforestating the mountains. So, and that takes time. It's not easy. We can get the help of many other people. But if we do this now, the future generations will be very thankful because we have lost ground. And then in the specific field of communication, I think that can be concretized in this idea that I mentioned before of being tender in a communication, being positive, offering dialogue, no? Accepting feedback and criticism, part of this idea of dialoguing with others. No? Trusting in others means also, culture of dialogue means trusting in others. And I say this, probably many of you are priests, no? Trusting, for example, in lay people. Sometimes I'm a lay people, so I have to defend my category. No? But so trying to trust in others. We need to form people to trust in them. But that's our job. We form people so we can trust, delegate, and be helped. And probably many of them will do much better than us. And that will be great if they can help. Using simple communication, which is not simplistic, but focusing on relevant issues that interest people. And I think via pulchritudine, so art, history, literature, things help a lot. And of course, offering a more charismatic, communication, no? Focusing on what is essential of the message, of the Christian message. Last slide, I promise. Just 3 suggestions for you in the future. No? Ongoing formation. I mean, keep open your mind. Keep the desire of growing intellectually in other fields also, spiritually, humanly, but also intellectually. I just put here an example of a course that we offered last semester. It was a course in church communication, a free course, so open course, open access. Because there are many examples of this. I'm saying this because we are reopening the course in May, at the end of May. So if somebody of you wants to follow, just need to register and do it. So there is no, you can do it any moment. It will be open for 2 months. No? In English, Spanish, and Italian. So I think it's an interesting offer to refresh your mind in church communication. It's like an introduction to church communications with videos. Because there will be the same link now. For the moment, the contents are still closed. Just have the description there, but it will be the same program, changing the dates, etc. Okay. Second aspect, I think, ongoing formation. Second aspects, balance in your communication, balance in your diet of information also. Go to the sources. No? Avoid polarization, but knowing the reality of it. This is the best way to really avoid promoting polarization and struggle. And final point is this idea of promoting unity. No? Let me say something that needs to be well understood. I wouldn't like to be considered eclectic, but it's more important to agree than being right. I repeat the sentence. It's more important to agree than being right. È più importante essere d'accordo che avere ragione. Okay? And this needs to be well understood, of course. No? But our goal is not creating division, it's more creating unity. Church and not also outside the church. I'm talking today to Christian communities. Okay, sorry very much if I went too long. I know that had so many ideas, but I thought could be interesting. If you have any question, I'm more than open. So thank you so much.
Hola, Yanil, muy buenas tardes para nosotros y seguro para ti buenas noches. Te quería informar que dentro de lo que estamos haciendo a nivel de provincia de Cruz del Sur, dentro del comité de comunicación, vamos a dejar al padre Cornil como referente de la provincia de Cruz del Sur para que tú le tengas presente. Yo te voy a mandar su correo y también su WhatsApp para que le tengas presente en todo lo que sea información o comunicación para la provincia de Cruz del Sur. Un abrazo grande y gracias a ti por tu servicio.